Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Ramachandra, Jai Shri Lakshmi Narasimha, Om Shri Surya Narayanaya Namaha. I'd like to welcome you all to a video discussing the predictions for the Lunar New Year 2024 to 25. So this New Year is known as the Krodhi Samvatsara. And while we shouldn't take the name just based on what it means, for those of you who know its meaning, which just means literally angry, on face value, we can use some of the historical accounts for this year and figure out what could happen during this year. So I'm going to mention a few predictions for this year, as well as some other important information and some other interesting information as well about this new year. Before we begin, I'd like to give a short introduction on what the Vedic New Year is. What is the reckoning system? The Vedic reckoning systems are very advanced, and we have 9 of them. We have, so we call them manas basically. We have Chandramana, Sauramana, Savanamana. Some of the Jyotish enthusiasts here might have heard of these or have studied them as well. But there are a few more which are out of human calculations. That is the Brahmamana, the Prajapatyamana, and so on. Today we'll be exploring a couple of reckoning systems for the new year and delineating predictions using them. So first of all, what is a Samvatsara? That's the first question we're going to attempt to answer. The Samvatsara is a way of reckoning the beginning of a lunar new year, and a Samvatsara basically means 1 year totally. So we can have different types of Samvatsaras. There is the Jovian Samvatsara based on Jupiter's movements and Jupiter's transits. We have the Saturnine and Jovian system. And we also have this, so that's called the Bharhaspatya Mana, and we also have the Samvatsara Mana, which is basically just based on the cycles of Jupiter and Saturn, which I'll also explain. Then we have the Lunar New Year, the exact date and time when the moon finishes 12 revolutions around the ecliptic belt. That is known as the Lunar New Year moment. And that moment is very significant. Most of the predictions that are made in this video are all based on that specific moment when the moon finishes its 12 revolutions around the zodiac. We're going to be casting charts for that and seeing how the world will be affected based on those very vital moments. So lunisolar way of calculation, and then the exact moment based on, of course, with different ayanamshas this would vary a little bit, but the exact moment when Jupiter moves from one sign to the other is also very important. And the third one, which most of us do agree on, would be the transits of Jupiter and Saturn and the revolutions of Jupiter and Saturn around the zodiac. So we have a 60-year cycle. Most of the things that happen in the world are cyclical. That is the very foundation of Jyotish Shastra. So there is a 60-year cyclical movement. Jupiter takes 12 years to move around the ecliptic belt, or rather the zodiac. Saturn takes 30 years. The least common multiple of both is 60 years. So there is a 60-year cycle that's based on this Jupiter-Saturn movement, and every 20 years, as most of our viewers would know, Jupiter and Saturn come together in a very important conjunction that's called the Great Conjunction or the Kosha Conjunction, which we have discussed in our previous videos. So this particular video is going to employ some of these terms, which is why I just wanted to familiarize you all with that. We recognize New Year's not just based on some sort of a calendar date, but based on very important positions in the solar system. That's the beauty of the Vedic systems. So this particular year, coming down to one of the most interesting parts of this year, it has parallels, direct parallels to the years 1964-65 and 1971. You might ask me how, and I'm going to explain that now. So 1971, the combinations were very similar, starting with this year. This Lunar New Year has direct parallels because in 1971 we had 3 degrees of Dhanus Rashi or Sagittarius rising when the Lunar New Year began in New Delhi skies. So exactly 3 degrees of Sagittarius were rising in the east, and 29 degrees in Scorpio were rising in Islamabad skies. Now, why is this very significant? I'm going to explain how this small belt has such significance on the lives of people, countries, and more. So the intersection point between 236 degrees and 40 minutes in the zodiac and 243 degrees and 20 minutes in the zodiac is a very sensitive region. And this area also coincides with the Jyeshtha and Mula nakshatra, the last pada of the Jyeshtha nakshatra, or the last quarter of the Jyeshtha nakshatra, and the first pada of the Mula nakshatra specifically are known as the Abhukta Mula Sandhi. And this section, as mentioned in the degrees and the count over there, is a very sensitive region. Jyeshtha is the first few stars of the constellation Scorpionus, and Mula is the last few stars of the constellation Scorpionus. This section in between those stars is a very powerful section. The energies of Indra, that is the Indra energies, as well as the Rakshasa energies, have a constant clash in this region. Mula represents the lowermost energies of the Kundalini Shakti, and Jyeshtha represents the Indra energies or the higher energies, both of which need a balance. But there's always a clash between these two. It's like a zodiac clash region or a border region that's very dangerous. Basically, where two ideologies or two adversaries are meeting. Whenever a child is born in such a time frame, there is always some sort of a mental health problem or a physical health problem, which I've noticed and which has been mentioned and documented by Parashara Muni in the Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra. Similarly, whenever a country or a project or say a venture or anything else is born in this time frame, it is considered to be a negative time frame and it often ends in doom. Whenever a negative graha passes through this time frame, or whenever a very important graha like Guru passes through this time frame, through this area of the zodiac, it can create a ruckus. So this is not a time frame, it's just a section of the zodiac in the sky, and it's a very sensitive region. So the last time we had the East rising under such an influence was in 1971 for New Delhi and Islamabad. And the next time we are having it is exactly now, 2024, April 8th, midnight. We had the eastern side rising exactly with 5 degrees Sagittarius for New Delhi, and we had 27 degrees Scorpio for Pakistan. So this was the situation at that time. So the last time we had this happen was we had a huge Bangladesh genocide that took place, and a lot of innocent Bangla people were killed in cold blood by the Pakistani military, and there was this operation called Searchlight, if I'm right, which was deadly. It killed hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people over there, including women and children, and total neglect of the Bangla population, and an absolutely horrible genocide that ensued in the 1970s. It was very horrible. The human rights situation around that time frame was just horrible. It would put the present human rights situations at shame. That was the level of horror that was experienced in the early 1970s by the Bangla people, and even the late 1960s as well. In response to that, the people of Bangladesh came together and formed the Mukti Bahini, aided by the Bharatiya Sena, as well as the Bharatiya government at that time. And because of the efforts of our army and the bravery of our army, as well as the bravery of their people and the support of the Bharatiya Sena and the Bharatiya government, the people of Bangladesh got their much cherished independence, and they were able to keep their heads high, and they were able to save themselves from the oppression and genocide by Pakistan. So this happened in 1971, and one iconic moment that we'd like to, of course, keep in mind is that Pakistan was badly defeated, and it was one of the worst moments for the country at that time, and its entire arrogance was broken and shattered. Its genocidal potential was reduced, and its overall stature in the world was reduced significantly. Bhārata had a decisive victory. While these were some positive aspects of that year, some negative aspects of that year were centered around the genocide that the people of Bangladesh had to face. Now we can draw direct parallels to that situation and the situation that is going to happen very soon. In 2024 also, as I mentioned, we had the same astronomical combination and the astrological combination. So we are going to see a very similar situation. And also 1964-65 had similar parallels to 2024-25. For example, we had the same Samvatsara cycle in 1964-65, and the same Samvatsara cycle is being experienced today. So we have to be very careful as Bharatiyas, although it is going to be a difficult year. We had around 3 degrees of Sagittarius rising as well. So it's going to be a difficult year, but it is going to end very well for Bharata before the end of next year. Some negative things will happen for sure. I have already flagged certain major risks for the country in my previous videos, as well as I've also flagged the security risk for Southeast Asia in my previous research that was published around 2 months back. But one thing is for sure, Pakistan is in for some serious trouble this year. That is definitely sure. The reason why other neighbors have to be careful is because an injured and angry cat is often more violent than a content tiger. That's something we have to keep in mind. Bharata is like a content tiger. We're not, hungry for many things constantly. We're not that kind of a country which runs around and tries to colonize other spaces and torture other people. We are not belonging to that group of people, and hence, and we have an economy that's 10 times the size of Pakistan. We have an army which is much more strong and more powerful than the military of Pakistan. Our military strength is also very powerful. The military budget itself is 10 times that of Pakistan nearly, and hence that does not mean we can let our guard down during this time frame, and I'm sure our government also is taking care of this very well. This is both an opportunity as well as a dangerous time frame for Bharata, and hence all regional entities and partners of Bharata and international security must beware of Pakistan during this time frame, as there is a major security risk, especially between 2024 and 25. There's a possibility of some ruckus in the Kashmir region, as we're already going to be seeing, and we're already seeing probably, and we're going to see astrological flashbacks from 1965 and 1971. So what the viewers should expect from this situation, although we should pray that there is minimal violence as much as possible, is a combination of 1965 and 1971. A combination of the two is going to be experienced this year. It might not be as horrific as 1971, and it's probably going to end sooner and easier, but this is something that we're going to be seeing happening. And there is a possibility of a regional all-out war as well during this year, or in 2029 to 33. But I am I also very strongly feel that this year is a potential, has potential combinations for an all-out war. And the other wars also might simmer a bit. It's not going to, go away. As I mentioned earlier, it's going to reduce and increase once again. So that's the kind of cycle we're going to see with the Israel-Gaza conflict, the Israel-Gaza war. It's going to take at least 1 year since its beginning, which was in October of 2023, which also again had astrological parallels to 2001, which was discussed in my previous video, wherein it was predicted 4 days before it happened. That was because we had a similar pattern as to 2001 and 1973. So we are seeing a similar combination, but it's probably going to end around within an year of its inception. This year is going to be not so great for Russia moving on to the other countries, but it'll come out fine overall. I mentioned this in my interview to Russia's state television channel as well. I'll upload that interview once it's translated by some of our Russian friends. And the United States, as predicted earlier, will also see itself getting involved with wars around the world. And as usual, there's going to be some trouble, but I don't expect anything totally out of the box. Although if we sense any specific dangerous combinations, I will let our audience know about that as well. So Bharata will be able to respond forcefully and successfully, although we are also likely to be bruised if we don't take care, as this year we are also moving through the Abhigya Sandhi. Israel will have an upper hand post the conflict. And one important thing that we should keep in mind is that in 1971, owing to the Bangladesh war, wherein there were a lot of positives for India's geopolitical stature, we also had one event that is not so positive, and that is the influx of immigrants, often illegal immigrants or war-torn, war-affected, people, refugees who ended up in India. More than 10 million of them ended up in India. And we might see a similar situation again around Kashmir or around the northwestern side of our country. We'll probably see a lot of immigrants coming in, and that is not going to be a very good situation as far as I can see. Within the next 5 or 6 years, things don't look good. And Pakistan might break into 5 or at least 2 or 3 parts by the end of this decade, or at least by 2033 at most. definitely Pakistan is going to see a major break somewhere very soon. So Israel will have so it is most likely going to have an upper hand post-conflict. But this is not going to give some peace to the Middle East. Definitely there'll be more conflicts, because the ideologies that have risen up in the Middle East, the ideologies and the religions that have risen there, just don't get along well with each other. Their books also clearly show, and the books, the religious books that they have also clearly read out their very essential terms, which is that they do not get well together. And that's why we see eternal conflict in that region ever since those religions began. When Islam began, when Christianity began, when Judaism rose, and when it fell, and then it rose again. We've just seen eternal conflict in that region. So I don't expect things to just go away anytime soon and peace being established in the Middle East, because the people there have such polarized ideologies despite being almost similar to each other. And it's so sad to see whatever is happening over there. It just doesn't seem to end. And of course, the Islamic jihadis also will not want it to end. They secretly, of course, want it to continue, because they believe in jihad, they believe in an afterlife, and they don't believe in making this life better. So that's a big problem, basically. So this is not going to go away, but Palestine might get some recognition, and Israel will probably continue its violent tirade. And 1 year, there might be a slight reduction, but it is again going to increase after 2029. And 2033, we expect a larger scale conflict in the Middle East. Mostly 2029 to 2033. There's a larger scale conflict in the Middle East that's highly likely. Another point which can be easily overlooked is South America. Not many people speak about South America, but there's something very interesting happening astrologically even there. It's after 60 years that we have a left candidate being voted to power with a very good majority in Brazil, Lula da Silva. I think early this year we had him voted to power. He took office. So if we look at the historical parallels, exactly 60 years back, again, towards the beginning of this video, I had mentioned the importance of those 60 years. It's the least common multiple of the 12-year revolution of Jupiter and the 30-year revolution of Saturn around the ecliptic belt. So the 60-year cycle holds a major influence on human ideologies and the way things change for different entities, including countries. And the same year in 1964, we also had a military coup which took over power from that left candidate and deposed him. I forgot the president's name in 1964 of Brazil, but this is something that I do very well remember that happened. So a very similar situation is going to happen in 2024-25. We are going to see Brazil having some sort of a military coup situation or a possible power struggle. Within 2 or 3 years, we're going to see something of that sort happening, as Brazil is not going to go very well together with this left ideology after some time, and something's going to change with them as well for some reason. And then going down to other parts of the world, we have Africa. Africa is going to see some regional violence, some prosperity, but not as great an year as we might see in 2025, which overall seems to be a little bit better, although there will be some violence as well. West Africa is also in for some trouble or some political alienation or some sort of issue, which I will delve deeper into in a separate video. And as far as the weather is concerned, a reversal of the reversal of drought cycles and drought conditions is expected around the world wherever we had drought last year. So that's also something which I see might happen. China looks good, but the military expenditure is most likely going to increase. As far as Europe is concerned, it is also going to be affected. As I've mentioned earlier a couple of times, these 20 years, next 20 years, will see Europe's power gradually declining. Although I don't expect a massive danger to them, I see the power of the whole European continent declining and declining and declining, and slowly getting engulfed in some sort of violence also. The present thing that's probably holding them together is the EU and the different institutions that they have, the common values that they have after the war, the values that they have ingrained in themselves after the war. That's basically keeping them together and keeping them away from major problems. But very soon, there is going to be some trouble, which I'll also explain after around 20 years. But the economy overall will also face issues. However, China's economy is most likely going to recover a little bit this year out of its low growth state to an extent. but the military expenditure is most likely going to increase. The next 9 years or so don't look that great for China, allowing India to grow massively. So when China basically reduces its overall speed, India will get an opportunity to grow. And we must make the best use of this opportunity and put all of our efforts into development of the country, bringing it out of poverty and giving it the best opportunities possible, and following a development ideology which is also currently being handled very well by our present administration. And I hope and pray it continues and we are able to experience the development and make the best use of the opportunity that China is leaving at this moment. So China's real estate sector is going to improve a little bit, avoiding a complete nosedive this year, because China's horoscope also looks good to an extent. The nexus between Pakistan and China is also a concern, but again, I don't expect that to be something that's going to totally derail the chances for Bhārata to grow. And Pakistan is going to improve communication and soft power in several regions around the world, thus trying to establish itself and consolidate its power in the different regions. And China and Pakistan relations might hit some complication towards mid-2025 approximately. Probably 2024 end itself, we're going to see some issues. This year itself, Pakistan and China's relations will hit some complication, which is again an opportunity for Bhārata. So 2024 to 25 rings the same bells as 1968 and 1971. For most of you history buffs, of course, who have gone through a lot of history, I love going through history and finding patterns and linking it with astrology. But one thing which I can say very clearly is that this year is going to see very similar situations to 1968-71, which includes the Vietnam War and genocide. Now that is a very serious thing, and a lot of people died in that geopolitical strife, and it also dealt a major blow to the United States. The overall outcome of that conflict, and a lot of people died and a lot of war crimes were committed. A similar thing is happening now in the Middle East, and a lot of people are dying, a lot of war crimes are being committed on both sides, and basically the whole region has a fundamental problem, which I think is a topic for further discussion. My next analysis will be on world religions and their history, without offering any personal opinions on any of them. I'd just like to go through the astrological history of them in our next episode. So the killing of innocents will most likely continue due to this complex geopolitical strife, and I also do believe in a astrological concept of the clash of civilizations, because that is a very real thing. It's just something that we can brush off, but at the end of the day, if you look at history, the clash of civilizations is technically something that is very, very real, and something that is happening, and something that's under the pulse every single time a conflict is happening. At least most of the time, there is that current. One thing I'd like to end the present discussion with is a verse, a very famous verse from the Vedic scriptures. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. So, my dear viewers and everybody, this verse means Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, let everybody be contented and happy. Sarve santu niramayaha, let everyone be free of disease. Let everyone see auspiciousness all around. Sarve bhadrani pashyantu, let there be security and auspiciousness everywhere. Ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, let there be no one who experiences sadness. So this is a universal prayer from the Vedic scriptures for everybody, irrespective of religion. Sanatana Dharma does not at all, differentiate between one human and another as far as the ultimate goal is concerned. It's only the material distinctions that make us different. At the end of the day, everything is one, and everyone should be happy and everyone should be contented. This is our prayer for today, and let's pray for world peace and well-being. Jai Shri Krishna, Vande Mataram, and thank you.